Brothers and sisters, we have the privilege of of introducing the next person who will be coming to us. And it's my distinct privilege to introduce you with Dr. CHIDI NGWABA. And I want to be able to just read for you his bio. Dr. CHIDI is a leading lifestyle doctor who has 4 degrees in science and medicine. He's trained in surgery, general practice, and lifestyle medicine at Cambridge, UCL, and Johns Hopkins, USA. His passion is to reverse, improve, or prevent many chronic illnesses, including heart disease, cancer, arthritis, and diabetes, and many more. With his unique program, Life Colors, he is a founding board member of the European Society of Lifestyle Medicine. He has over 20 years of experience as a national and international health and motivational speaker, including TED Talks on reversing disease. He has served at the South England Conference for 12 years, 6 years as the men's ministry coordinator, and 6 years as the health director. He has led evangelistic health programs and talks throughout the world, including as the health speaker for Hope for Africa 2023 with Pastor Mark Finley. He has also served as an elder at 3 churches in Croydon, Norbury, and Hampstead, where he also served as the head elder. He was the medical expert and contributor to Europe's most popular health magazine, Top Santé, and contributes to the Daily Express, the Daily Mail, as well as TV and radio shows such as ITV's Good Morning Britain, BBC, Sky News, and is the resident doctor on Premier Radio. He starred in the Amazon/Apple TV movie, The End of Medicine, that's now available on YouTube. And he is the director and founder of a lifestyle medicine clinic on Harley Street. And he has founded 2 successful and award-winning healthy restaurants called Plant in Soho, London, and that's really to encourage healthy eating. In 2016, he received a national award in leadership for his work in reversing disease. His mission to bring health, healing, and hope to communities around the world is, I think, a message that all of us can resonate with. Dr. CHIDI, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. We are so thrilled that you are with us, and we are looking forward eagerly to your presentation. And for all of our folks who are on, you can follow Dr. CHIDI on Twitter, and he is also a regular contributor on YouTube. Dr. CHIDI, how to reverse all.
Thank you very much, and it's an absolute privilege to be part of this wonderful expo. I was delighted to be invited, and I feel humbled to be with you all. Yes, I wish I was with you in person, but you know, this is the modern society. Yes, I bring you greetings from sunny London. Yes, the sun does shine in London. In fact, I'm just outside of London, but the sun does shine here sometimes. And today we had a little bit, so I'm going to bring you that sunshine from London today. And thank you so much for the introduction. I really do appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be involved in this kind of meeting where we are seeking to just make people healthy and give people control of their own health. I've seen some of my colleagues that I've known for such a long time over the years, Dr. Neil Nedley, Dr. Jackson, and I appreciate everything they've done thus far. But today, as you said, I'm going to be talking about how to beat disease. That sounds like a very bold statement. I think if I came across that many years ago, I'd think, well, who is this person trying to sell snake oil? But I guarantee everything I'm talking about is scientifically based and has worked for thousands of people over the years. Okay, so why don't we get started? Has been mentioned, I do a program called Life Colors, and those life colors, each color represents a different big disease, a big lifestyle disease, be it diabetes, heart disease, depression, or whatever. And really what we're saying is, if it's a lifestyle that gets you into the disease, it must be a lifestyle that gets you out of the disease. It can't just be medicine, surgery. I mean, God has given us means to get ourselves out of the problem that we've gotten ourselves into, if we know how. But if I'm going to start any kind of talk these days, it's important to mention something that we all are familiar with, and that is COVID-19. If I was looking for a raise of hands, I would know that just about, well, in fact, everybody has heard of COVID-19 if you are from this planet. It has affected the whole globe. The response to COVID-19 has affected us also. But I want to take you back to those early months of COVID, where we are in Europe. We were getting messages, especially from Italy, that in the beginning, over 99% of the people who were dying from COVID were dying with underlying conditions, at least one, sometimes 3, 4, or 5, but they had at least one. So the majority of the people that died, over 99%, had at least one disease. So that started me thinking, because obviously my whole life is about reversing disease. Well, why aren't they talking about getting rid of the underlying disease? You know, to make sure that people were not so vulnerable to this coming illness. Not much was spoken about that. What were those diseases? As I've said, similar disease, heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure, cancer, respiratory disease. If you had one of those, you were at a greater risk of dying or having a very bad complication of COVID-19. And I always say that these lifestyle diseases are very much like a bear stalking us in the distance. Nobody wants to be followed by a bear, but if it's in the distance, you know what? I'm not too worried. It can't really kill me. I'd rather it wasn't there, but if it's far away, I'm okay. That's a bit like some of the lifestyle diseases we have. I've got diabetes. I have to go to the hospital to get my checkups, to take my medicine. I don't really want to do it, but you know, it's not killing me today. But what happened when COVID-19 comes along is very much like when big insults to the system come along, big stresses to the system, or any other illness comes to the system. It gave rocket fuel to those underlying diseases, so that whereas we could cope with them before, with COVID-19, they became lethal to us. And it's just like a bear on your shoulder rather than a bear stalking us in the distance. So as I say, it's important that we try then, whilst we have the time now, to try to eliminate those diseases, not just so that we can live a happy, healthy life, but also to protect us from what is coming in the future. Because believe me, there will be more pandemics, there will be more insults onto our body, mind, and spirit. So we should prepare now whilst we have the opportunity. And just as a side note, all of these viruses that come out and affect man and cause incredible mortality, whether they've been manufactured in a lab or not, their origin comes from animals. It's the way we treat animals and the way we eat animals that leads to these viruses proliferating. So that is just something to keep in the back of your mind. Sometimes we're getting these warnings that perhaps we shouldn't be eating the things that we're eating. Okay, but let's carry on. There's something else that we should also talk about, and I will come back to, and that is, apart from having an underlying disease, if your vitamin D levels were low or insufficient, you had a much greater risk of having problems with COVID-19. And in fact, I had the privilege of talking to the government of the day and the opposition party of the day, advising them that the reason why black and brown people were suffering worse in Northern European countries when the initial COVID-19 was coming along was because their vitamin D levels were so low. And if you've heard of me, you would have known that for the last 10, 15 years, if there's one thing I've been promoting is vitamin D for everyone. I will come back to that a little bit later. But let's look at how do we beat disease? What I will do, because I can't do everything this evening, what I think I will do is just give you at least one tip for one of the big diseases, what you can do for yourself right now, and how you can help yourself to prevent or reverse the disease. And why don't we start with the heart? Okay, the heart still is one of the biggest killers in the Western world. Heart disease, I mean, the heart doesn't kill you, obviously, that keeps us alive, but the disease of the heart, if you're going to die prematurely, you've got a 50-50 chance it's going to be to do with your heart. Now, what one tip could I give you to overcome or prevent the risk of heart disease? Simple to start with. Have a healthy plant-based diet, a healthy plant-based diet. It has been shown that if you have a healthy plant-based diet, doesn't matter what race, sex, age you are, It will help to reverse and prevent any lifestyle clogging of those arteries. When we talk about heart disease, we're talking about the arteries that supply the heart. They start to get furred up with cholesterol, fat, calcium. And here it says that you can reduce the risk by about 40%. Some studies will tell you it's 70% or more. So just being on a healthy, whole grain, plant-based diet, just that alone. I've not talked about exercise. I've not talked about stress management. That alone will start to reduce your risk of heart disease. Okay, let's go on to number 2, blood pressure. Now, I am guaranteed that everybody listening to me knows at least one person with high blood pressure. In fact, many of you listening will have high blood pressure. It's kind of like a Western epidemic. In fact, it's not just Western because it's affecting the whole world these days. What one thing would I advise you to do? Just one thing. There are many things you can do, but the one thing I'm going to talk about today is if you really want to lower your blood pressure, start eating dark greens. Now, dark greens are incredibly special. If there's one type of food you should eat every day, it is greens. I would say greens, beans, vegetables, and fruits, but we're focusing on greens, and the darker the better. You see, when we digest greens, the thing that makes it green is obviously the chlorophyll. As we're digesting that chlorophyll and it gets into our system, it does something quite special in our bodies. It stimulates the interior lining of our arteries to release a special chemical called nitric oxide. That nitric oxide helps to open up the arteries, and as you open up the arteries, you will lower the blood pressure. When we close down the arteries, the blood pressure raises. In fact, when we're stressed, our arteries close down and the blood pressure goes up. But if you eat your greens and you digest them, that nitric oxide that's released from our own body will open up the arteries and allow more blood to flow through. So imagine now also just what we were talking about before, heart disease, it will start to open up the coronary arteries as well. So it will lower your risk of heart disease as well. But just for blood pressure alone, it will lower your blood pressure. Now, I should say that this nitric oxide that your body releases is also the active ingredient of a well-known drug called Viagra. I think over there you call it Cialis. Now, I can't see your faces. I can't see if you're blushing or not, but I'm sure many of us know the reasons why we take this drug, Viagra or Cialis. Okay, erectile dysfunction. And it takes me back to something that I hear all the time. Gentlemen always say to me, Dr. Chidi, yes, I want to reduce my blood pressure, but don't tell me about rabbit food. Give me some real food. Well, the one thing I always say to them is, the one thing we know about rabbits, they do not need Viagra. I think I should move on. You understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so greens lower the blood pressure. Eat as much greens, and then you can be like a rabbit in the ways that you need. Okay, number 3, the answer to cancer. Many answers, there are many things to do. And when I treat patients, when I help patients to reverse their disease, there are many things that we have to do. But here's one that we must all do, and that is to spice up your life. We used to have a pop group in Britain called the Spice Girls. It's nothing to do with them. It is all to do with, in fact, there were 4 Spice Girls. I got 4 spices here. Nothing to do with them, but it's all about having those natural wonder drugs, spices. The reason why they were so expensive in the old days, and some of them are still expensive today, is because they have such life-giving properties. So you take something like turmeric, one of the most powerful antioxidants. What does that mean? Powerful antioxidant just means that I look at oxidation in the body like rusting in metal. It's biological rusting. The body can be oxidized, the DNA can get oxidized, and the more it's oxidized, the more chance you have of having a deformity in the DNA causing cancer. So if you lower the amount of oxidation like turmeric will do, you lower the risk of cancer. Ginger is similar. Ginger is very similar. In fact, it's from the same family. Cinnamon is wonderful. Cinnamon not only lowers your blood glucose, because remember, cancer loves sugar. So if you're lowering your blood sugar, you lower your risk of cancer. But cinnamon also has been found to prevent many viral illnesses. They realized that the Sri Lankan ladies who harvest the cinnamon bark very rarely got measles. And so they realized that there's something about cinnamon, it's quite high in vitamin A, that prevents viral illnesses. So it's a double whammy for you. And then, of course, things like cardamom, spices like cardamom, they boost the number of natural killer cells in the system. Natural killer cells are the white blood cells that go around your body looking for problems. You know, they're like the army. They go looking for problems like cancer and viruses, and the more of them and the more active they can be, the greater your chance of killing all cancers in the body. I always tell people that all of us have cancer. We've all got cancerous cells in the body. The reason why we don't get the disease is because we have a beautiful immune system led by these natural killer cells that can seek out and destroy those cancerous cells before they become a big problem. Okay, diabetes. I probably spend at least half of my time reversing diabetes. Okay. Especially type 2 diabetes. We do have a lot of success with type 1 as well. But there are so many things to do. But I'll give you this tip just for now. Oh, and this is that after every single meal you have, and this is what I tell all of my guests, I don't call them patients, I call them guests. Patients involves long suffering, so I don't deal with that. I tell all of my guests, look, after every meal, take yourself out for a walk. Why do we say that? Well, even if you're having a very healthy meal, your blood sugar will still start to rise somewhat after a meal as it's been digested. All that food digested, broken down into sugar, goes out into the system, and the blood sugar starts to rise. Most of the cells in the body need insulin to absorb the sugar, but there are some cells that do not. Your brain doesn't need insulin, and your muscles don't need insulin. So if you go out for a walk, you are exercising the big muscles of the body. And so those muscles will soon need lots of glucose. And so they will absorb lots of the glucose, lowering your blood glucose and lowering your need then for insulin in the system, because insulin will try to mop up extra glucose. And the less insulin you have in your system, the more your cells will then become insulin sensitive. You know, absence makes the heart grow fonder. The less insulin you have in the system, the more your cells are going to start craving it and the more they'll be able to respond to it, as we see in type 2 diabetes. So it reverses that insulin resistance and makes them sensitive again. So after every meal, in fact, I tell people, do not eat unless you are ready to immediately go out for a walk. Have those trainers on, have those tracksuits ready, and take yourself out for a walk to help you overcome insulin resistance and diabetes. Now, friendly fire. I guess this is quite a topical phrase because there are wars going on around the world. Many of them America is involved in. They seem to be involved in many wars. Anyway, this is not political. But the biggest tragedy is when somebody is shot or killed by their own team. You know, it's bad enough killing people who are enemies, but killing people who are friends, that's a tragedy. And we call that friendly fire. And it's a bit like what happens in the body when our immune system, which is perfectly designed to destroy invaders like viruses and bacteria and all sorts of other invaders and cancers. But instead of doing that, it affects our good tissue, our good cells. So we call that friendly fire, and it's an autoimmune disease. Many people suffer from it. By the way, black people suffer much more than white people, and women much more than men. So black women, in fact, I have a lecture called What's Up with Black Women? Provocative title. It's not about what's going on in their minds, but what's going on in their bodies. These autoimmune diseases, which are disproportionately affecting black women, aren't really dealt with in I would say, a careful and scientific way. We give them lots of drugs to suppress their immune system, but sadly that suppresses their entire immune system, which makes them more susceptible to cancers and what have you. But if we understand what causes these autoimmune diseases, and by the way, wherever you have tissue in your body, whether it's lung, liver, gut, eye, hair, whatever, you will have antibodies that can affect it, autoantibodies that will destroy it. So there's hundreds of different diseases. Now, the problem is this all starts in the gut, especially when we're children. Okay, so we call it this leaky gut syndrome. And the reason why we have a leaky gut syndrome is if you're stressed, or if you have a virus, or if you're any sort of problems, your gut tends to take the brunt of the problems, and they become a bit leaky, and they let larger proteins than normal into the bloodstream, especially the milk protein, casein. That protein that gets into the bloodstream is then detected as foreign by the antibodies, and the antibodies then say, well, this is foreign, we need to destroy it. They destroy things based on their protein code. So as those antibodies have destroyed it with the B cells, they then start to look for other areas in the body that look like what they've destroyed. So if the protein code looks like your thyroid gland, they start to attack your thyroid gland, your joints, your colon, your kidneys. That's why we get all of these diseases. And so the important thing is not just to take medication to suppress the system, because your body will still be generating those antibodies. What you need to do is be on a program that can help you reverse these diseases. And I found that within about 2 months, you're starting to see, if you're on the right path, the suppression of all of these symptoms, because the antibodies are now starting to die away. That's the only way to really get rid of these diseases. At the bottom of this, you can see the New England Journal of Medicine, a highly reputed journal, told us many years ago that the trigger for type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune problem. The trigger for it was bovine protein, bovine meaning from the cow, most predominantly milk protein triggers type 1 diabetes. So if you want to prevent children from getting type 1 diabetes, please don't give them loads of cow's milk. Obviously, another American export, The Simpsons, told us don't have a cow, man. And I would agree with that. Don't avoid milk protein. That is one thing you can do to avoid getting an autoimmune disease. Now, America is a wonderful place, but let's just say it has a problem with obesity. And we, as the original colonizers of America, we're no different. We're getting exactly the same. So how do we beat this battle of obesity, or battle of fat, let me say? Some people who are slim like to say, well, I don't need this. I'm slim. I don't need to know about how to lose fat. Well, actually, we all do. It doesn't matter what you look like. We all need to get rid of certain types of fat. You see, this subcutaneous fat that you can see here, yes, it does cause a problem. But the bigger problem with fat is that one that we can't really see. It's on the slim people. And if you see a slim person who eats loads of junk food and doesn't do much exercise, but they stay slim, guaranteed they'll have lots of what we call visceral fat. Visceral fat is what surrounds most of our organs and arteries and causes cancer and all sorts of problems. And it's worse than the obvious subcutaneous fat. So you all need to know how we're going to overcome this battle of the bulge. And the one thing that I will say to you is give up the white stuff. This is not a racist statement. I'm obviously talking about sugar. The refined sugar in particular, that donut on the right, that's refined sugar, and having, as God intended sugar to be, surrounded by minerals, vitamins, water, and fiber, as is in the apple. That's how we're supposed to consume sugar. Now, some of you are thinking, well, that's easy to say, Dr. Chidi. Well, it is easy to say, and I know it's more difficult to do. I've had my own problems with sugar over the years. In fact, I remember a time when my mum came to visit me. I've been one of those people whereby if I have one of these biscuits or something, you call them cookies, I'd have to eat the whole packet. I've been like that. So I'm talking from a place of sympathy and empathy. But she brought to my house a cake. And I said to her, look, you know what I'm like. Don't bring cakes to the house, because I find it difficult to deal with that. So she said, oh, you know, every once in a while it's interesting to change. So she brought the cake and I said, look, just put it away so I can't see it. Hide it in the fridge somewhere. Obviously, all day I'm thinking about the cake. I go to bed, I'm still thinking about the cake. I'm lying in my bed thinking about the cake. And I say to her, well, how am I going to get to sleep? You know, maybe if I go down and have a look at the cake, that will just get it out of my mind. Go down, look at the cake. Or maybe if I have a little slice, a thin slice, hardly any calories in it. Anyway, you know how the story ends. I finished the cake that night. So I know what it is like. But let me give you a little tip here. It's called the Dr. CHIDI method. It's called the Dr. CHIDI method. And because when that donut is calling your name, the worst thing you can do is say, I must not eat the donut. You know, like children, anything we must not do, we want to do more. So what you should do is say, okay, I will eat the donut, but I'll eat it in half an hour. Even I can wait half an hour. Okay. At the same time, eat something like an apple. You have an apple, it will release sugar slowly into the system so that by the time you reach half an hour, you'll have enough sugar in the system to help you overcome the desire for the donut. I know some of you are looking at me saying, after half an hour, I'll still want the donut. I don't want this apple business. Well, if that happens, you do the same thing again. Maybe at the end of the day, you've eaten 5 apples. Absolutely fantastic. Maybe once in a while you will fail at the Dr. CHIDI method, but at least you will fail fewer times than if you didn't try it. And the reason why we call it the Dr. CHIDI method, because it stands for don't resist it, choose to have it, but delay it. Don't resist, choose to have it, but delay it. That spells Dr. CHIDI. Okay, moving on. We must not forget dementia. I would say that dementia is now one of the most feared lifestyle diseases. Yeah, just about, because you lose your memory. With that, you lose your personality. It affects not just you, but your family. It's a fearful thing to have, but we shouldn't be so fearful because there is hope. The wonderful thing about dementia, if there can be a wonderful thing, is that it is not random. Sometimes people portray the fact that, oh, it could just hit anybody. Well, it does hit different people, different sexes, races, classes, but it's a lifestyle disease. We've known for a long time that if you are hypertensive, obese, have diabetes, you have a high risk of getting dementia. One thing that really causes a high risk is having lots of stress in the middle of your life, extended stress, that sort of stress that comes from work and relationships and whatever. So we're going to need to deal with that. But let me give you one easy tip, because the good news is also that dementia, the symptoms, if you find them early, you can reverse up to 90% of the symptoms. Yes, I said up to 90% of the symptoms of dementia by kicking in with all the brilliant lifestyle advice that we can give you. And one that I'm giving you today is for a very good memory, eat more berries. And the study was done on blueberries, actually, but it will refer to any berries. Because they are so high in antioxidant material, what they do is protect those neurons, protect those nerve cells in the brain from progressing in their deterioration. And so when they do that, a lot of the inflammation around those nerves goes down, and that inflammation has been causing much of the symptoms. So a lot of the symptoms could be kicked into reverse just by starting this. And along with lots of other things that we do for people, we've seen great results happen for people with dementia, especially in the early years of dementia. Well, 8 and 9, really, stress and depression. I know Dr. Neil Nedley talks a lot about depression, and there are many good things we can get from that. But let me give you just a little tip. One little tip is that, look, if you are stressed or depressed, there's usually some triggers. These are not the root causes, but these are the triggers. And the triggers, we call them the 4 Ds: debt, divorce, disease, or death. Well, if you have experienced any of these, the best thing to do is to get some help. Don't hide away. Some things can make us feel ashamed if we don't want to talk, but like mushrooms, they grow in the dark. All of these stress and anxiety and depression, they grow. And what we need to do is just talk to somebody who can help us out. That initial barrier, that initial shame or fear that we have, once we overcome that, you find that lots of things start to make sense. And when you ask, well, how can you heal from things like stress and depression? One of the things that we have to talk about is forgiveness. In fact, I would say just about every disease I deal with when we're reversing disease, we have to spend some time talking about letting go of the hurt and learning to forgive. By forgiving, we lower all of our stress hormones, we reduce our risk of all the other lifestyle diseases. So getting to a place of forgiveness, that forgiveness that God has given us, and by giving it to us, he's asking us to mirror that with those around us. And most importantly, also to forgive ourselves. We've done things that we haven't liked about ourselves. Nobody may know about it. Coming to a place where we can forgive ourselves and come to a place of peace with ourselves is vitally important, vitally important. So that's one of the big tools. Now, I've spoken about just about all of the big lifestyle diseases, absolutely. And I spend all of my time, in fact, I only deal with reversing diseases now. I don't do any other part of my practice. But these tips that I've given you are quite interesting. I said I've given you one tip for each disease. Now, this is the wonderful thing about lifestyle medicine, because every one of those tips can help every one of those diseases. So I haven't just given you 9 tips. I've actually given you 9 times 9, 81 tips, because they can all help. And this is the beauty of a holistic approach to medicine, the holistic approach that God has given us. If it helps you with one area of your life, it should help you with every other area of your life too. You shouldn't be doing something for your health in diabetes that makes your blood pressure go up or your risk of cancer go up. No, if you're being treated for one, if it's the right method, it should help with absolutely everything else. Now, as I say, I spend a lot of my time doing this, and that's what Life Colors is all about. But I must tell you that those of you who are interested, who want to kickstart your health, well, we are starting some wonderful health retreats in sunny England, and we'll be doing some later this year. And if you want more information about it, please get onto the website, or that's the best thing to do. Get onto the website, look up to the newsletter, and you will find more about it. But for now, I think I will close there. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to be open. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chidi. It truly was a very interesting, I wouldn't say it was a lecture, because even though it sounded like that, even though you didn't get a question, it sounded very interactive, because while you were talking, we were writing it down.
Okay.
And I think that by and large, we now know how we can be able to do at least one thing to be able to move the process forward wherever these things may be, maybe more or less having a challenge in our lives, or in the lives of someone that we know. And I wanted to ask the question. Now it's interesting that I was particularly interested on the point you made about diabetes. You said that we should walk after every meal.
Yes.
And that intrigued me, and I wanted you to dive a little bit more into that. What is the reason for that?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I remember many years ago when I was a teenager, I read this book, Ministry of Healing, Ellen White, and she said, after every meal, walk. Now, I was a 16-year-old and I thought I knew it all. And I thought to myself, well, if you go for a walk after a meal, surely you're going to get indigestion. That can't be good advice. But lo and behold, years later, the science has caught up. And when you have, if you have an issue with sugar in the system, so diabetes, even cancer, or even high blood pressure, as you start to walk, you're using the biggest muscles in the body, and they will absorb most of the free sugar in the system. And as you absorb the free sugar, that means your liver has to release less insulin, or pancreas has to release less insulin to convert the sugar into glycogen in the liver. So as you need less insulin, your cells in your body then say, all right, well, we haven't had insulin for a long time. Maybe we can get sensitive again to insulin. That is the key to beating diabetes, making the cells in the body, all 50 trillion of them, more sensitive to insulin again. This is one of the many tools in the arsenal to get there.
Interesting. And we just had a question in the chat. How long should this walk be?
Well, so in a day, after each meal, I'd say no less than half an hour, no less than half an hour. But I always recommend in a day, one should do a good hour's walk every single day. And, you know, people say, well, I don't have the time. I've got children, I've got work, look, you have to make the time. And there are easier ways to make the time. You can go out for a walk with your children, with your spouse, in your lunch break at work. But these are things that must be done every day. We are built for moving.
Sister Shirley, I see that you're there. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your presentation. I'm looking through the chat. There's just so many people just thanking you for this wonderful presentation and the wealth of information that you shared. Someone asked, is it possible to reverse osteosclerosis through lifestyle?
Absolutely. That was number one. So when I said disease of the heart, that is atherosclerosis, heart disease. That's when the arteries are starting to close down. That is actually quite, still to me, I mean, I treat people with heart disease, atherosclerosis, that's the posh name for it. I do that all the time, but still I'm amazed at it, because in medical school, we were never taught this. We were taught if you have atherosclerosis or heart disease, well, you need drugs to open up the system, maybe put a stent in it, or maybe actually have to rip open your chest and have a bypass. I used to be well, in my training as surgery, I used to do cardiothoracic surgery. We used to do 3 of those every single day. Big, brutal operations. But just by changing your diet and lifestyle in the correct program, you can reverse every single one of those arteries that are blocking up. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
I've got one, Charlene. Dr. CHIDI, you didn't specifically speak to this, but I know someone was asking me the question. Chronic pain seems to be a feature of a lot of people's lifestyle today. Is there anything that you would recommend that would help with this particular issue? Yes.
So obviously chronic pain can be anywhere for any reason. So I could be here all week telling you what to do for each one of them. But let me take a general point of view. So chronic pain must come from some kind of inflammation. So pain comes when your nerves are being compressed, and your nerves don't like being compressed, and they tell you that's painful. So something is swelling. So let's just take the fact that it's inflammation. Well, the best thing to do for inflammation, absolutely, has got to be some of the basics that we always talk about. So make sure you have a healthy plant-based diet. No refined sugar. Refined sugar causes lots of inflammation. We were just talking about insulin. It doesn't just cause your glucose to get into cells. What it also does is cause everything to grow and inflame. The more insulin you have, the more inflammation you have. So lower your refined sugar, up the amount of greens, beans, vegetables, fruit. And obviously I was talking earlier about spices, turmeric, ginger, those sorts of things reduce the amount of inflammation. And if you take turmeric with things like black pepper, it boosts its effect by about 20 times because it stops the amount of destruction in your system. So there are lots of things you can do, but definitely those are some of the basics that are quite easy to do.
Thank you so much for your response. The chat is on fire right now, and we have a limited amount of time. But the most common thing that I see being asked is how to get in contact with you. Can you just repeat the website or your email address? I'm not sure which one you provided.
Okay, so that's right. So can you actually see my slide that's on the screen at the moment? No? Hello?
We didn't see any
No.
screens. We
Sorry?
didn't know you were there.
You'll need to share that one with us, Dr. Chidi. We're not seeing.
We didn't see any
You,
slides.
you haven't seen any slides at all.
We had no idea you were sharing slides.
Okay.
It was wonderful without the slides.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So write this down then, everybody. So my website is www.drchidi.com, drchidi.com. Okay. So if you go onto that website and you sign up, we'll get information to you, or you can get me on YouTube or Twitter or X on Dr. Chidi MD, DRCHIDIMD, DRCHIDIMD. Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't see any of the lovely pictures.
We believe me.
We tested it beforehand.
No, believe me and trust me, Dr. Chidi, you didn't need them.
Okay, all right. Well, that's very kind. Thank you. But yes, but go to the website, drchidi.com. In fact, even if you Google Dr. Chidi, you know, a lot of things will come up for me. But obviously, if you want to get hold of the website and know about the retreats that we're going to do, it will actually be our first retreat here in England. So if you're interested in that, please let us know.
So one more question before we close. And I'm sure a lot of parents are probably dealing with children who are autistic. I saw a question in the chat. Is there any hope, you know, as far as dealing with that?
Dealing with autism. Okay. There's always hope. And that's the wonderful thing. I don't think I've ever come across any illness where I can say there is no hope. There is always hope. So, and the reason why I can confidently say that is because even autism, which many will say is a structural problem in the brain, even if you can't fully reverse it, now what I'm about to say is still a challenge, by having the right nutrition, by reducing the amount of inflammation and giving the right nutrients, you are able to reduce the amount of symptoms. Now, I say that could still be a challenge because many autistic children have a problem in taking certain types of food. So really you have to kind of disguise the food. It's taking children's health into the next level. So for example, I always tell parents, if you've got young children who don't like greens and vegetables, you really have to hide it in lovely smoothies or in cakes or in whatever. But you have to do that. If you know what the tastes are of your child, putting lots of greens in, giving them different types of spices, you will see a dramatic effect. And taking away many of those refined sugars come up so often in everything. Taking that away, you can really reduce some of the symptoms.
Well, Dr. Chidi, we want to thank you so much. I think it would be remiss of me if we were to let you go before we ask Dr. Deonarang to publicly thank you for your really great presentation and so on. Dr. Deonarang, I hope I'm not jumping you with this particular request.
No, absolutely not. I really appreciate you bringing me on to thank Dr. Chidi one more time. Dr. Chidi, thank you so much. And what I like best about your presentation is that you're so calm and convincing, and you pull me into listening, and I really appreciate that. And I think I might be speaking for many others too. I really appreciate your connection with God and using your knowledge to bless so many souls. So thank you so much on behalf of the Northeastern Conference and our health ministry team.